We will now have to move to the next one, which I am super curious about because it's going to be, and thanks a lot, Hendrik, again. It's going to be a presentation by Krisstina Rao, or Krisstina, you will say it better than me for sure, about the digital public infrastructure map and measuring the exchange of data. Very interesting presentation that's coming from the DPI mapping initiative at the University College London. So, Krisstina, if you're ready, I will already just leave the floor to you. I remind everybody, 15 minutes, and then we'll do quick Q&A, and then we actually have the last presentation of the day.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Federico. I hope you can hear me. Perfect.
Absolutely. Everything perfect.
Thank you. I just set a timer, so I'll keep the 15 minutes. Very pleased to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Krisstina. I'm joining you guys from Berlin. I work with the UCL, University College London, Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. I could only join briefly for the Schleswig-Holstein presentation, so I didn't get to catch Quebec and Argentina. But I gather that this is going to be a curveball of a presentation because I'm not a technologist. I don't work in technology. I'm a researcher, mostly working in state capacity and trying to understand how governments are trying to deliver better digital services. So that's the starting point. What you'll see in this presentation is a project, of course, dpimapping.org. But more specifically, how is it that we're measuring the exchange of data? This project has really been framing a lot of policy discussions across the world. There's been a movement to invest more in digital government and digital transformation, focusing on infrastructure capabilities. And our role over the past 2 years of this project has been to ask how did these new capabilities rest in a state's capability to deliver services? So yes, it's about IT budget spend for most of these departments and governments, but more importantly, how are they reframing institutional governance structures? How is the rest of society and other actors like the private sector participating in actually exemplifying the infrastructure value of these projects? So stay with me. The way this goes is I'll introduce a little bit of the digital public infrastructure framing, which I realize has come up and it came up in the previous presentation. But there's been a lot of definitional debate. So I'll spend some time on it, introduce the project to you, and then hopefully spend most of this time diving into what it means for the measurement of the exchange of data, where X-Road has kind of shown us the light and shown us the way of how things could be done. But as you'll see, and as the map has studied over the past 2 years, different countries and governments are doing the exchange of data differently. Our job has been to try and assess how they're doing it and what does it mean for them to do it better over time. So with that, I'm diving in. The DPI picture is best understood through what got popular because of DPI. In big parts of the world, especially developing and underdeveloped contexts of the world, things like direct cash transfers, getting access to credit because of losing jobs because of COVID. All of this has been impossible, but COVID kind of acted as a catalyst over the past few years to get governments to say, hey, no, we can't see people face to face. What kind of structures do we need in place? Yes, we have registries, but how does it speak to a bank account? How do you translate a person being eligible for a certain service and them getting an automatic transfer based on that? Questions like these, which are very urgent policy questions, have gained new urgency over the past while. DPI kind of got framed in this sort of development question, but has now become more than a development movement. We're seeing with the map and with other initiatives that a bunch of different governments across the world, maybe there are regional patterns, maybe there are income-based patterns. They're approaching infrastructure development differently, and we've tried to study what this looks like. So what is DPI? What is DPI?
Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's go.
it's great to see that there are other people alive on the call. So
Yeah, alive
no
and kicking.
worries at all. So this question is rather large, but I'll attempt to answer it. And maybe it speaks to the registry question that came up in the previous call. The left is the silo piece of architecture that you see, which is how most governments since the time of the church managing most registries have been developing their digital services. They start with individual databases for individual use cases, and they build a bunch of middleware to make that data accessible for different services along the way. These vertical lines do not speak to each other. So there is no single source of truth. If the tax department has collected your information, so has the banking department, so has social services, so on and so forth. This is wasteful. It's expensive. Governments don't have unlimited budgets to keep spending money and duplicating systems like these. The movement lately, especially with X-Road, but also a number of other systems across the world, has been to create infrastructure capabilities, which means that maybe this layer at the bottom, maybe the middle layer, maybe the top layer, the application level is shared. So if someone starts developing capabilities, the thinking now is not only how do you serve the tax department use cases, but what are sort of common pieces of architecture and building blocks that you can create that can be shared across departments. You save money, you make government service delivery more efficient, but it's easier said than done. What we've actually found is governments might start at the bottom sometimes, they might start at the use case level at the top, which means they might duplicate their own registers, they don't know what information they have collected. It's all quite confusing because there is no one single source of truth of what even exists. So this is where we come in. About 2 years ago, we started thinking about if different governments are doing this infrastructure capability development differently, can we offer some common framing to it to try and offer a lens to what should governments invest in, what should multilateral partners invest in? If governments are getting loans on these topics, how can we make sure there's efficiencies introduced within these loans by development banks or whoever else? So we tried to cater to the definitional issues around these infrastructure capabilities. We wanted to address a lot of financing issues. Governments are duplicating expenditures across different models of siloed versus infrastructure. We were trying to offer some blinders to focus their attention and spending on. And then we realized that there's no one way to spend a certain public sector IT budget, but also it's not only going to depend, it's not an efficiency decision only. A lot of it depends on IT structures, market rules, institutional governance norms, and they also kind of shape and mold how a government decides to prioritize their IT spend. So looks ambitious. We are ultimately a research project. We started just adding data to all of these questions, and that's how the map was born. So the DPI mapping project caters to a bunch of different stakeholders, researchers, governments, technical assistance partners who are working alongside governments to build DPI, and also advocates who care about how all of this is happening in an inclusive way, in a safe way, and in a way that caters to public interest. There's two specific outputs that I'll keep talking about during my presentation. One is a sort of measurement methodology. You've seen already how murky the concept of DPI can look. What we did is we tried and we brought some empirical analysis to it. We identified about 6 features, which we're calling attributes of DPI, and 48 indicators to measure them across 3 components, digital ID, digital payment systems, and data exchange systems. So the data exchange system is going to get most of the attention, but all this is to say is DPI and the way we frame it focuses on authentication, which happens through ID systems, transactions, which happens through payment systems, and the exchange of information, which happens through data exchange systems. And then finally, using this sort of conceptual framework, we tried to study how the world is conducting these capabilities. So we have a data set of about 210 countries, and I'm going to share some analysis on what came out of studying data exchange systems from there. So this is the framework. Towards the end, I've linked the paper if you'd like to read it. What is really interesting, and I think a primary takeaway from this paper, is that DPI is about all of these things. Like I said, it's 3 capabilities in the top. It's technology being interoperable and extensible. It's also governance features, because all of this relies in public service delivery, adding public interest value to citizens' lives. So it focuses on transparency and privacy and inclusion. It's all grounded in a state's capacity to be able to do something. You can spend, you can have a high spend, but if you don't have the talent within the IT department to keep it running, it's still going to come shuttling down. And then scale of adoption, meaning which other departments across the government are adopting it, because only then can you exemplify the infrastructure capabilities. Based on this, we did a whole measurement exercise. So these are great features to have. It tells us how DPI should be, but what is DPI truly like? We came up with a set of metrics, and some of these metrics we've been able to measure, and this is what it's told us. So in our global data set, what we found is there's some 60 systems across the world, ID systems, that can be called DPI-like, meaning they allow digital authentication, they're used by more than one department, they're active. Similarly, for payment systems, this number is 100. Data exchange systems, there are 102, which is very curious to us because data exchange systems are impeccably hard to study from a desk research-based methodology. They are middleware. Governments don't release any information unless you have access to project-based documentation. You usually need someone on the inside to even translate these documents, even though it's all in English, to us. So you'll see why the number is 102 for data exchange systems and 60 for ID systems. And it's because, and the reason why I'm presenting at this platform is it's very hard to study data exchange systems, and we'd love your support in investigating it further. So just to say, this project has been running for 2 years. A bunch of policy-wise important people are using it, so it matters that this data is good. And this is the plea to invite your support in making this data better. We've, of course, worked with NICE and with Vile previously on scouting the X-Road database for deployments of X-Road across the world. But for the other deployments of data exchange systems, we've relied on secondary reported data by governments on their websites, or maybe implementations of X-Road like UXP, who have gotten on the phone with us and told us these are the countries that are using it, and this is exactly how they're implementing it. The cool thing about data exchange systems, which is not true for ID and payment systems, is that we tend to assume with data exchange systems that a certain governance feature is true based on the underlying base architecture. So if they're using X-Road, it's true that the transfer happens in real time. If they're using X-Road, it's true that eligibility considerations for different departments are made very transparent. And that's because all of this is baked into X-Road's architecture. But it's not true for other kind of systems, and we're curious in finding out these links better over the next while. So that was a framing around DPI. The next while I'm going to spend on data exchange systems. Our key question was, how might the exchange of data be facilitated by countries while exemplifying public interest values and creating state capabilities that can be adopted by a multitude of actors? Seems very simple. We broke it down into a bunch of different metrics. We found about 20 indicators, of which we found data for about 9 of those indicators, and we studied these 9 indicators across 210 countries. So let me give you an example. The way we studied whether or not a system for data exchange is interoperable and extensible, which was a key feature in the cool diagram that I showed you earlier. We tried to study this to this indicator. We tried to look for semantic interoperability, meaning do systems speak to each other? Is there any rule or process that helps us study this and evidence this through both policy and technical means? And then the data point that we looked for is literally a document that said, this is either promoted as a policy, interoperability by design across government, or a certain rule document was sent to us saying, this government has this capability. It's a rule here. If that wasn't present, it was very hard for us to look out for it. Similarly, for transparency and accountability, we look for enrollment conditions. Again, we scanned either the website of the data exchange system or the digital government website to look for, hey, if a certain department is looking for data from another department, do they set up an MOU or do they access a certain system that you need a government login for to access a certain either personal or non-personal data? And what do those access restrictions, etc., look like? For scale of adoption, we try to look for proof of this being used across the government. So this is a way, and yeah.
I will interrupt just a second. I will jump in just for a moment to say, if you could wrap up, then we move on to the next presentation and we keep the moment of Q&A, because I also have a question for you actually on this after also the next presentation.
That sounds good. I'll wrap up. These are my last two slides. So one is we studied these systems. We tried to arrive at how many data exchange systems across the world are DPI-like. About 170 came up, 110 of them are active, 102 of them operate across sectors, and they're not just sectoral data exchanges. And then if you segment for whether or not they reveal information about enrollment criteria and they're truly open and transparent, about 58 pop up. There's also a distribution of which underlying architectures they use. This, as you see, is not comparative. API gateway is fairly rudimentary, but then there's something as sophisticated as X-Road. There's also enterprise service buses. This is all terminology that governments use to report on whether or not they facilitate data exchange. And as is a desk-based methodology, we'd love to make this better. But you'll see distribution revealing a lot about which kind of system is popular, say, in a specific region. I think I will pause there because I've thrown a lot of information at you and there might be questions. But if you'd like to keep in touch and access either the project or keep in touch with the reporting from this project, there's a QR code and my email ID is on the screen. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Krisstina, amazingly interesting, super nice. Also, as a researcher myself, and also a researcher on these topics, I obviously have a lot of questions, which I will keep for a different moment. I think that as some as are already doing actually in this community event in the chat to this call. They're already like getting in touch and exchanging contacts to then go deeper into certain topics afterwards. Then I can already tell you that I am booking a spot, booking a slot actually for that. So Krisstina, thanks a lot for this.